Does the ontological argument work? Well, of course not. It, like all religious philosophical arguments, completely falls apart the instant that you give them the slightest glance, but the religious seem really impressed because they sadly aren't that bright. So let's prove that once again, coming up next. This one might be a little shorter than normal, but I wanted to address a video by Caleb Smith on the ontological argument. These things get thrown around like crazy, and none of it works at all. I really want to throw a wrench into his claims and show just how stupid it all is, and really how dishonest, because he, like all theists, can't be consistent on anything at all. They do it because they really like it on this specific issue, and then they just ignore it on everything else. Because these people are really dumb and irrational. So, let's get to it.
You are 10 times more likely to be bitten by someone in your hometown than a shark. Because if you add up all the police reports that involve biting and divide by the number of people, it's 10 times more than the number of shark attacks.
So, I guess it depends on where you live. If you live on a deserted island surrounded by hungry sharks, then you are much more likely to get bitten by a shark than by another person, especially if you're the only person around and you're dumb enough to go out there and swim in the water. This is kind of the problem with generalizing. You don't take specific circumstances into account. I don't know that this has a lot to do with the ontological argument, though, so let's get back to the video and see.
That's what the ontological argument is like. It's technically true, I guess, and I can't figure out where the reasoning is wrong, but it just feels false, and I'm still afraid of shark attacks.
But your feelings don't matter, and neither does your fear. It might be important to you, but in the real world of data and facts, you don't mean a damn thing. This is something I've said many times before. You aren't important. Learn to deal with that simple fact. The objective reality that we all live in, it doesn't care about you at all. Gravity and the speed of light continue to be whatever they are, no matter how you feel about them. In the theological realm, there either is a God, or gods I suppose, or there isn't. How you feel about it means nothing. Your beliefs don't mean a damn thing, and this is something that a lot of people, religious and non-religious people alike, they seem to have a real problem with this, don't they? Too bad. Learn to deal with reality because you are entirely unimportant.
Give it a goog. That's what the ontological argument is like. That's a phrase I heard. Instead of Google it, give it a goog. Half the people love it, half the people hate it. That's what the ontological argument is like.
What the hell are you smoking? Seriously, I was going to do this video because I wanted to respond to the actual ontological argument, and this was supposed to give it in a short, hopefully concise manner. And that's really what I'm looking for. Someone who can cut through all the BS and just get to the core of the matter so that I can respond. So maybe I made a serious mistake here. Maybe Caleb is just another religious loon. Of course he is, but maybe he's even worse than normal. I guess the only way to find out is to push forward, so I really hope I'm not wasting everyone's time.
In this video, I'm going to present a version of the ontological argument in 40 seconds or fewer, and I want you to rate me on how clear is this argument, how persuasive is this argument, and whether you think this will actually convince anyone to join the kingdom of God or not.
Finally! Let's get to something meaningful and not waste everybody's time. That's what I'm here for, to find these things that I can respond to easily. I want to see your version of the ontological argument so that I can evaluate it for myself rationally. To be honest, No version of the ontological argument that I've ever seen has been worth a damn, and I'll explain why. In fact, I will speak generally about the problem with every single religious philosophical argument that I have ever seen. Every single one of them is based on one or two closely related logical fallacies. You've got the argument from ignorance. I don't get it, therefore God. Or you've got the argument from personal incredulity. I don't like it, therefore God. Neither of those are actual evidence for any gods whatsoever. It's just a way to reject reality and substitute your own. Here's a thing that I like better. I can't prove that thing is real, but I like it, so I'm going to pretend that it means something when everybody with a brain should know how irrelevant it actually is. And this is why we have to get beyond the person, and the religious simply can't do that, can they? All they care about is the person and their feelings and their desires and wishes and dreams, and sorry, that doesn't mean anything. It just means that you are an idiot, and you should probably knock that off. So let's get back to this actual argument and see how poorly it fares in actual reality. Because I can't imagine that he's got anything worthwhile to say, but I would be happy to be proven wrong.
So, 40 seconds on the clock, here we go. There are only 4 types of things.
That's your claim. I'll let you get to it, of course, but there's really only 3 things on his list that are actually defensible in the real world, and one that he's going to rely on, but that is just absurd. Hopefully I'm not jumping the gun here, but you have impossible things. Those are things that simply can't exist. Square circles, married bachelors, stuff like that. Things that violate reality. So far, so good. As long as our understanding of reality is reasonably accurate, this stuff isn't there. Then you have possible minus. Stuff that could be there, that's certainly possible to exist, but at least so far as we know, it doesn't. Because this is a problem that he might run into. I've got no idea what else he's going to say, but our understanding is inherently limited. It is possible that a purple unicorn could exist. You know, a horse with a horn colored purple. That doesn't violate our understanding of the natural world. As long as that's what we're going to define a purple unicorn as, that could be out there someplace. So far as we know, there aren't any, at least not on our planet, but the question isn't, does it exist here, but does it exist at all? There are billions and billions and billions of other planets out there that could conceivably have something that we might identify as a purple unicorn living on it. We have no evidence, and it's the evidence that matters. Anyone who says such things do not exist has the same burden of proof as those who might say that they do. How this might apply to whatever he's going to say next, I don't know. But it's something to keep in mind. No evidence should mean no conclusion, and that goes for everything. Our knowledge is always tentative. That's something a lot of people just don't like, and too bad for you. Next comes the stuff that can exist, and in fact, does exist. We have evidence for that. Horse, right there. Go study it. That position is justified. Where he's going to run into problems is with his necessary claim, because he can't actually show that anything is actually necessary. It's like stuff he really wants to be true, and that doesn't matter, does it? A thing is either true or it's not. It exists or it doesn't. Or we just don't know either way, and we have to withhold our conclusions. If we don't know, then we have no business whatsoever making any claims at all. So he's probably going to explain all this stuff again, and I'm sorry I've got no control over that. So let's go see.
Impossible things like square circles and married bachelors.
I swear, I didn't know he was going to say that, although I suppose those are some of the most common examples, so I'm just going to chalk it up to commonality in culture and just move on.
possible things that happen not to exist, like unicorns and dodo birds.
But dodo birds did exist. We can prove that. We don't think they exist today, or at least we haven't seen any since about 1681, but that doesn't make it impossible for them to exist because they did. All we have to do is be wrong about their extinction, which maybe we are, maybe we're not. We're probably not, but it's impossible to know for absolutely certain. And that's about all we can say about that. Unicorns, maybe. And I know I use that as an example as well, but if you define a unicorn as is traditionally been defined, a magical horse with a horn that does impossible things and has an affinity for virgins, then unicorns are not possible. Magic doesn't demonstrably exist. If you just call it a horse with a horn as I did, then it's entirely possible that maybe somewhere out there someplace, there could be a herd or two. You just don't know. Granted, I'm just arguing for the sake of arguing, but sometimes that's necessary for clarity. Anyhow, don't mind me. Keep on going, Caleb. You've got to get to a point in there sometime.
Possible things that do exist, like you or me, and necessary things, like some people would say the laws of logic or numbers.
Which I don't agree. Those aren't necessary because they exist only because humans are here and came up with them. If there was no intelligent life in the universe, then math wouldn't exist because math requires intelligent minds to evaluate and quantify the physical world. The laws of logic are there because we looked around and said, yep, stuff seems to work like that. And so far, at least in our limited experience, we've been right. Those things aren't necessary. They are invented. They are observations that we have made that don't exist without us or some other intelligent mind to make those observations. Now, I know where he's going with this. He's going to claim that God is a necessary thing, but gods, like numbers and logic, they don't exist without humans or other potential intelligent minds to come up with the concepts of the gods, at least not demonstrably. I mean, the universe itself isn't necessary in the sense that it just has to exist, period. We don't know that. Our experience is absurdly limited in that regard. For all we know, it's entirely possible for the universe not to exist, because we wouldn't be here to see it if it didn't. We don't know any of this stuff. Let's just stop pretending that we do.
God, by definition, is the best of all possible beings, so we're not talking about a contingent possible being that just happens to exist or not.
You don't get to just define things into reality. How did you get to that definition, and how do you know that it's true? And more importantly, how do you prove that to others? That's a question that the religious have no answer for, and they just don't care. They just really like it, but liking stuff doesn't make it true, does it? I could just as easily say that purple unicorns are, by definition, the best conceivable form of life, and by definition, it must exist, so it's entirely necessary. That doesn't mean anything, any more than his empty assertion about his imaginary friend. This is just philosophical masturbation. Notice what he wrote there. What we mean by God isn't 2 or 3. Well, how do we know that what you mean by God is true and demonstrable reality? It certainly doesn't seem to be, does it? Just because you really like the idea, that is irrelevant. If what you mean by God isn't tied to anything demonstrably real, then it's just a concept in your head and therefore wholly irrational to the conversation. Well, what I mean by Hogwarts isn't 2 or 3. So what? Who cares? This is why this falls apart entirely, because making stuff up in your head doesn't get you to a better understanding of factual reality. It just doesn't. Rent a clue.
So God isn't category 2 or 3 by definition.
And there he goes. You don't just get to invent definitions that don't actually refer to anything in the real world. We can go right back to Guanilo's perfect island. It's the most perfect island that anyone can possibly conceive of, and therefore, by definition, it must exist. But it doesn't. Guanilo just made it up, just like the religious have done with their gods. It is at this point that the entire thing comes crashing down into a rubble pile of irrationality. That's why these things just don't work. But I really want it to be true. That is irrelevant. That's why every single one of these arguments are catastrophically fallacious. You can't do that. Unfortunately, the religious can't do anything else, can they?
And God isn't impossible. No one has proven he absolutely can't exist.
Magic isn't real. God is magic, therefore God can't exist. The time to accept a thing is true is when you have evidence that it's true and not one instant before. Because you can really do this with anything, right? Well, you can't absolutely prove magic isn't real, therefore Hogwarts exists. As I said before, we are inherently limited to our knowledge in the moment because we occupy only a small corner of known reality, and we're making a lot of assumptions about what exists beyond our tiny neighborhood that we can't actually prove. So, hey, anything goes, right? You can't prove it isn't there, so it is. Except that's not how any of this works. The burden of proof rests on the person claiming that it does exist, and so far at least, nobody has shown that there are any actual gods out there. Therefore, we don't believe it, and neither should you. So this is not going to go anywhere. Shifting the burden of proof, another logical fallacy, isn't going to help your case. It's just going to show just how irrational you are. And that's not a good thing.
Therefore, God is necessary.
Bullshit. Therefore, you're an idiot. This is exactly what I was hoping he was going to say, because it betrays his own irrationality, and that's not exactly a surprise, is it? You don't get to just declare that God is necessary until you can prove that God is real first. Get to work. You are going to see this in every single attempt by an apologist at any of these philosophical arguments, because every single one of them rely on it. I believe it, so it's got to be true. Wrong. It is true if and only if you can demonstrate it to be true. And you're not even trying to do that. This is argument by assertion. Don't let them get away with it. Shut this shit down immediately. They have nothing else to fall back on because they have no evidence to support any of their claims. They will just run away because they really can't do anything else, can they? And that's sad, right?
I didn't give any background to what the ontological argument is or the specificity of these terms necessary and possible.
You're right. You didn't. I had to do that. I had to point out all the places that you are going wrong because you really like the idea, but really liking the idea doesn't mean a damn thing. I don't know if the religious are just plain stupid, because seriously, they would never fall for this crap in anything else in their lives. Or they're just being dishonest because, really, you'd have to be, wouldn't you? Nobody can be this dumb all the time, at least I hope not. And they're not, because if you gave them my unicorn example, they wouldn't fall for that, would they? This is very carefully crafted bullshittery because they just really want it to be true. But that doesn't make it true. It just makes them stupid and dishonest, and that's hardly a surprise, is it?
So if you want more background on that, give it a goog. Remember, rate me in the comments. I want to see whether you think this works or not. Thanks for watching.
It doesn't work. Now, I might comment and tell him where he's wrong, but lots of people have already done so, even Christians. Of course, it's a complete waste of my time doing so because he wouldn't care. It wouldn't change his mind. He'd just find a way to rationalize his way around it because he really wants this stuff to be true. It's why people like Frank Turek and William Lane Craig, among others, who have both extensively used arguments like this, well, they're still doing it. You don't think they haven't been corrected 1,000,001 times? Of course they have, but they don't care, and it makes them money, so they're just going to keep saying it verbatim, even if it is demonstrable bullshit. This is really the problem with the religious. They don't care one bit. This is all based on fifis and faith and the nonsense stories that they've been told from the pulpit because they all really want it to be true. Whether it is true or not, whether it is defensible or not, that doesn't matter one bit. That's not what they're in this for. Well, it sounds good to me, and hey, it gets me where I want to go. That's all they care about. It's just laughable nonsense that doesn't stand up to a moment's critical scrutiny, and they are not remotely interested. That's why they're total morons and why they deserve nothing but laughter and derision. Because these people have real problems, don't they? But they don't care.